You've been thinking about running, I guess, for a while now. When did you decide to run? Just recently?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this all year when people have said, you got to run for Senate, you need to run for Senate. And I thought, well, you know, I got a lot of considerations, a lot of things. But every day I read the news, I see the news, and I think, boy, this isn't good. What's happening in Washington, D.C. is not good for Maine people. Some of the things like, you know, I go to the grocery store and I see the price of everything from bread and macaroni and cheese rising, you know, and I think this is hitting Maine people in the pocketbooks. This topsy-turvy economy, the tariffs, and the votes in Congress to confirm people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Linda McMahon, who want to destroy the things that we feel are valuable, we find valuable. And I think there's a great deal of frustration out there, and I've been hearing it every day, going around the state and talking to regular people on Main Street and the barbershops and beauty salons and Grange halls and corner stores. People are frustrated with what's happening and what's not happening in Washington, D.C., and the Congress is not standing up to Donald Trump. These are urgent times. And Susan Collins is not standing up to Donald Trump. These are times when I think about my grandchildren. I don't think I could look my grandchildren, my granddaughters in the eye, and if I had to tell them I hadn't done everything I could to stand up for their rights and stand up for Maine people in this urgent time. So things have not gotten any better in this in D.C. in the last few months. They've only gotten worse. And I've stood up to bullies all my life, and I will continue to stand up to bullies in D.C. for the sake of Maine people.
You stood up to President Trump. I understand that's what made you sort of decide to run for Senate?
No, that was back in February.
Okay.
I mean, that was a jaw-dropping moment, Brad, for me. And I mean, I guess the rest of the country heard it too, because people approach me all the time and say, you need to keep standing up. And it was a jaw-dropping moment for me because what he said was, I am the law, basically. And as an American citizen, as a Mainer with that old independent streak, I thought, that's not true. You're not the law. Only the Congress makes the laws. And the Congress hasn't stood up to him. And they have to, for the sake of Maine people, for the sake of health care, education, food stamps, for goodness sakes, Medicaid, climate action, all those things that we have fought for in our state, the President of the United States is tearing apart. And the Congress and Susan Collins are not standing up to him.
You and Senator Collins, it seems like they've always gotten along pretty well. Do you expect that to change, or do you think this will be a contentious race?
Well, look, I think I've always had a good working relationship with all four members of Congress. That doesn't mean I agree with their votes, any individual votes by any individual member of Congress, but, you know, and I don't like her votes on many things. Going back to Kavanaugh, that was a dangerous vote, and it allowed him to be part of the majority that overturned Roe v. Wade, as a result of which women across this country are dying on the doorsteps of emergency rooms because they can't get life-saving health care as a result of a miscarriage. While we're fighting in Maine to preserve health care, preserve reproductive rights for women and girls in Maine every step of the way. We shouldn't have to do that, but it's because of the Supreme Court and the justices for whom Susan Collins voted that we're having to fight this fight.
In the last election, Senator Collins won every community in Maine, I believe, except for Portland. Can she be beat?
Look, the people who've run against her in the past, good people, but they were untested. We can't take any chances this time around. I've won 2 statewide races, and I'm the only one in this race who's actually won an election. And I'm the only one who's fought for Maine people, who's brought progress to the table, who's made progress for Maine people in health care and education, fighting climate change, all those things, delivering for Maine people, free school meals for Maine children, free community college for high school grads, kindergarten, pre-K, all those things we fought for, and expanding Medicaid to 100,000 people. All those things are being attacked and threatened by the current administration in Washington. Yes, I am the person who can defeat Susan Collins and stand up to Donald Trump. I'm the only one in this race who's actually stood up to Donald Trump to his face, in fact.
Senator Collins has won over Democrats in the past. Can you win over Republicans, and how would you do that?
Well, look, I have to admit, I was brought up in a Republican family in rural Maine. And I respect the Republicans deeply. I respect our legacy here in Maine, the legacy of people who have served us in the United States Senate going back to Margaret Chase Smith, Bill Cohen, George Mitchell, and Olympia Snow, Republicans and Democrats who have stood up, told truth to power, and stood up to preserve our democracy at times when it counted, at urgent times like this today. Times when it counted, they stood up for Maine, they stood up for our country.
You say you only plan to run for one term. How come?
Look, it's obvious how come. I mean, common sense, okay? But these next few years are so important. I want to get down there and stand up for Maine people the way I've stood up for them my entire life.
Is age going to be a factor in this race? Do you feel like you're 77, Senator Collins 72, some of the other candidates are a little bit younger? Your thoughts about that?
Sure, age is a consideration. It's a legitimate consideration. I've thought about that. I've thought about, well, you know, I could just serve out my term. I could go to camp and go fishing the rest of my life. I'm not a wealthy person, but I have a house and a camp, and I would love to spend more time there. But these times are dangerous and they are urgent. These are tough decisions, but it's a tough time for American citizens. It's a tough time for Maine people who are sick and tired of paying higher prices at the grocery store. Sick and tired of people in Washington who don't stand up for them. Hardworking people, hardworking men and women and families in Maine who aren't getting their fair share. And I will go to Washington and stand up for them.
President Trump, in the last time he was elected, Democrats won big in the 2 years into his office. He's now taking steps to try to gerrymander certain districts in Republican states. How important is it for Democrats to take back the Senate, maybe the House as well? And do you feel like that's what's going to happen?
Well, first of all, every person's vote should be sacred. And gerrymandering is a wrong thing. Clearly, in whatever state, whether Texas or New Hampshire or anywhere else, if they gerrymander the vote, that's wrong. It deprives the citizens of this country of their freedom and their freedom to vote. And I will stand up for the right to vote. But it is important to have many voices in Congress, and it is important to have people in Congress who will stand up for the people of their states and the people of their districts, and that's what I aim to do.
You've talked about some of the issues, but if elected, what are some of the issues you want to tackle?
Well, health care is a big one, for crying out loud. I mean, right now on the table is the immediate repeal of the tax credits, the Affordable Care Act tax credits for health insurance that thousands of Maine people depend on. Self-employed people, small businesses, people working in small businesses across this state are depending on continuing those tax credits in perpetuity so they can pay for their health insurance. If they don't have that, look, I've worked for 6.5 years to bring down the uninsured rate. It's now down around 5%. That's huge progress for us. And it's good for the hospitals who don't have to take up the uncompensated care of those people who don't have health insurance. So we've expanded health care. We've expanded access to health insurance as well. If that goes away, it is critical that people, to understand that they may lose their health care. We can't let that happen.
Graham Plattner's been making some headway. He's raised a lot of money. What do you think about the primary race?
I welcome a primary. I've had primaries before. My goodness, when I ran statewide in 2018, I ran in a 7-way primary, and I won. I've won two statewide races. I've won two statewide races. I've delivered for Maine people. People know that with me, what you see is what you get. I welcome the dialogue. I welcome the robust discussions, and with all the other candidates in this primary.
You've talked about some of this, but I just want to ask you this again. President Trump has made some pretty unpopular decisions that has impacted Maine, the tariffs, ICE. How do you feel like the president is harming the people of Maine?
Just go to the grocery store. Just look at the prices on the shelves, the prices of bread, macaroni, every kind of thing. I know when my husband was alive and I was a full-time district attorney and helping raise 5 daughters, I would rush home at night and I would grab a box of macaroni and cheese or rotisserie chicken off the shelves and off the rotisserie and at Hannaford's or Shaw's and run home and make dinner. Try to support a family of 7 and hang on to a full-time job, and you can't do that very well anymore. It's harder and harder for working families to make a living and to pay the bills. I know that, and that's in good part because of Trump's actions. The roller coaster economy that he's driven us into with roller coaster tariffs and taking away food stamps for children at the same time he continues great tax benefits for billionaires. That's wrong.
If elected, and you don't get a majority, how would you go about trying to fight the president? Whether it's Democrats or Republicans, he maybe will do whatever he wants to do at this point.
Well, as I said, Congress has to have a backbone. People of whatever party need to stand up to him when he's doing things that are dangerous and harmful to Maine people, to the people of their districts. And that's what I intend to do.
You expect a great deal of money to be spent on this race, and are you prepared for that? We've had some big races.
I'm not a fan of Citizens United. Let me start with that. It's a shame that people have to raise so much money to be viable in a statewide race, but that's the reality today. That's the reality for all the candidates in statewide races, unfortunately, but I'll do my best with whatever I can raise and whatever I've got.
We've got another No Kings protest planned for this coming Saturday. Can you talk about that a little bit? What do you think about these protests seem to be gaining momentum? Your thoughts about that?
Sure, look, it's about the rule of law and it's about preserving our democracy. I feel that too. That frustration is building every week, every month, every time Donald Trump loses in court somewhere because his actions are unconstitutional, because his actions are illegal. We feel the frustration and the pressure to go out and say he's wrong. Now, I've always said if he does something that is good for Maine people, I'll support him. If he does things, when he does things that are bad for Maine people, I'll fight him. And that's what I intend to do. And I feel that energy out there. I feel that frustration that people across this state and people across America have when they see due process rights being violated, when they see families getting hurt in the pocketbook, when they see children not getting a fair shake at a good education because of where they live or how they live. It's wrong. It's wrong to unravel our public health infrastructure and tell people they shouldn't get life-saving vaccines. All those things are frustrating to me and to thousands of Maine people.